Now we're live.
There we're live.
Awesome. Well, we are like about 5 minutes behind, but whoever is here getting in, we have so much appreciation. This was our first official time hard Quirk here using StreamYard. So we had our own like technical issues. I feel at this point, like we at Hard Quirk are notorious for not understanding technology for the most part.
Yeah, we're young.
We are who we are. Yeah, even though we're young, we're not hip. Don't get the two confused for sure. Well, yeah. So hello, everyone. My name's Allie. This is Maya. We're the co-founders of Hard Quirk. We were here last week for the same exact seminar with Jenna Overbaugh. She introduced us and honored us with an invitation to return and take over and answer kind of all of your questions about things with OCD, things with quirkiness, how we embrace our quirks, how we try to help our peers embrace theirs. Both of us have kind of our own story of lived experience, which we're happy to share. But mostly this is all about you all. And we really want to hopefully use our experience to answer any questions that you might have. Maya, do you want to do a little intro?
Yeah. So my name is Maya. I'm the other co-founder of Hard Quirk. I don't know what else to say. I feel like we covered a lot last time, but yeah, so Hard Quirk is here. We are a nonprofit. We are both individuals with firsthand lived experience with OCD, and we kind of started Hard Quirk as a way to really build up the OCD community and the support system outside of treatment. And so we run support groups that are completely free. We try to be as accessible as possible and maintain that across all of our different services. And in addition to support groups, we also have an online presence on social media, doing a lot of advocacy kind of stuff there. Intrusive Thought Thursdays are a fun time to kind of share your intrusive thoughts and decrease the stigma around them. And SUD Sundays are a time for us to all kind of engage in ERP and kind of share what we're doing to embrace discomfort that day. Yes, that's us in a nutshell. But I would love to kind of transition us into answering some questions. So of course, send any questions in here. All right, so I'm going to put this up. I'm learning how to do this. Okay. Let's see.
Nice.
All right, perfect. So this just happened. I have OCD about backing over a child in the driveway. Common. A few years ago, or a few hours ago, I got in my truck to take my kid to the park. I backed out, drove down the road, and then realized my kid is not in the car. I scream, turn around, and fly back to my house thinking my kid is dead in the driveway. I pull in, kid is nowhere in sight. Go in house and kid is happily watching TV. # real life exposure.
Accurate.
And then the question aspect of things. What do you do after that? Just go on with life, feel all the feelings. I love that this was added onto this. Yeah, I mean, Allie, I want to hear your thoughts, of course, but the first part of like my gut reaction to this question is like, yeah, we just go on with life. You know, intrusive thoughts and this, you know, even when they are super vivid like this on such a visceral experience, you know, they are intrusive thoughts and they are things that pass. And so, yeah, just kind of continuing on with your day and allowing those feelings to be there. I think that's also a huge and important part, is just not resisting the emotions that come up as a result of that, allowing and making space for those as well. But Allie, yeah, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, like the first thing is I'm just like, okay, OCD, you are not slick, right? Like OCD is taking like two things, very common, hit and run. And then your child, which is probably the thing that you care about the most in the world. And your OCD is like, let me latch right onto that. That's very typical. Unsurprising. I mean, I've known people who don't even have children, but they specifically have the hit and run obsession with like children. So like, especially in like a school parking lot or something like that. And yeah, I mean, that's horrifying, right? Like that's something that's really, really horrible that has happened to people, that could happen to people. And it sounds like in this moment, it didn't, right? Your kid's actually inside, like happy as can be, enjoying extra time at the TV. And so, I mean, yeah, I think that's a very valid question. Like, what do you do after that? Because in some ways, I think that could almost feel traumatic, that amount of fear, that amount of panic. And I think without invalidating that, just as Maia said, it's kind of like the entire intention is to do nothing. Like the thing you do is nothing. You acknowledge that fear and that thought, allow those feelings to be there. As you said, feel all the feelings. And then you go do whatever it is you were going to do. So then you grab your kid and you go to the park and you're engaging in what it feels like to be at the park and practicing sort of being present, being mindful in that activity with your kid, which might feel like one of the hardest things ever to do. And at times not even feel irresponsible. But that's what I'd encourage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely goes along with the using your values as a guide, you know. Clearly your OCD is communicating to you that your child is a huge value of yours. And so what can you do to really align with that is to continue to spend that precious time with them.
Yeah.
I'm
have some
gonna
more questions coming in.
yes.
I'm excited. So
No,
happy to hear from you all.
go to this one. Can you talk about accepting uncertainty, your experience with it? I have been working with a therapist on my OCD, but the biggest barrier I'm running into is that I'm not able to fully accept uncertainty. Yeah, that's a huge question right there. Accepting uncertainty.
It's the key
is
to all things.
It is the key to all things, but where is this key? How do we access this key?
I mean, I have something. If you want me to dive in,
go for it.
I mean, for me, like I immediately noticed, like I'm not able to fully accept uncertainty, and recognizing that, and we learn this in like DBT or dialectical behavior therapy. We learn this in ERP or exposure and response prevention therapy, that things that feel very much out of our control or feel like they're not choices, they actually are. Right. So even though it feels really much like really strongly like you are not able to fully accept uncertainty, the reality is like practicing acceptance is itself a skill. And I've experienced it a lot as kind of like fake it till you make it a lot of times. So even when I'm not like fully into this idea of embracing it, I try to reframe my cognitions or my thoughts. I will practice willing hands, which is like a DBT skill. There are all these kind of smaller skills that you can do to notice when you're not fully accepting the uncertainty, when you notice that white knuckling or the holding on to control. There's some things that you can sort of do to open yourself back up to that experience of uncertainty. And I think the challenge with this skill is being able, or willing rather, to return to it over and over again, and with patience and with love for yourself and with compassion and understanding that like it's not going to come naturally. You are going to have to practice it and learn it repeatedly. Mm-hmm. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Kind of on the converse of that, what comes to mind for me is also the idea of not necessarily accepting uncertainty, but dealing with willfulness and not like that lack of willingness to embrace the uncertainty to whatever the situation is that you're confronted with. Like facing the willfulness as opposed to like reaching after this, what can often feel like kind of an abstract idea of accepting uncertainty. Like how do I actually, how is that tangible to me? And I mean, for me personally, I think sometimes taking a step back and kind of realizing when I am being willful, when I am refusing and holding on to that kind of expectation of that I have of what I want to happen or what needs to happen, when I'm holding on very tightly to that, that's something that I can pay attention to very clearly and, you know, keep an eye on, let go of. That feels slightly more tangible to me, at least. But yeah. This is like the fundamental aspect of OCD that like we all struggle with so greatly, is this accepting uncertainty. That's like the foundation of
and humanity.
Yeah,
like all
honestly.
people struggle with that. Yeah. And everything is uncertain. Mm-hmm. Like the hugest parts of life are so uncertain. And I think we're not alone as people who have OCD and how distressing that can truly be.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Let's go over to another question.
I think I can show them too.
Oh, you
Can I
can?
try one?
Yeah,
I'm
if you have one
curious.
you want to do,
I don't know
yeah,
if I can do it.
go for it. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's exciting.
No.
Okay, so from Rachel, what would be a good couple exposures to the fear of dying from carbon monoxide poisoning in your own home? Well, like maybe not putting carbon monoxide in your home. That's like my first, like maybe don't do that. Just like first suggestion, right? But I think there are a lot of options for things that you probably can do. Just because with all things OCD related, like there is some element of how it's disrupting your life. So whatever it is that you're avoiding, whatever it is that the rituals are really disrupting, I think you can probably do those things. And then of course, I think there's some other creative ways to kind of manufacture that experience as well. I don't really struggle with like necessarily the fear of carbon monoxide, but in general, like chemicals that I can inhale and things like that, I totally struggle with. So I'm really curious to hear what Maia has to say, because it might be like an exposure that I need to try at some point. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that was a really good point, Allie, of like paying attention to what the rituals are or where you're finding yourself stuck with this particular fear. And that's a good place to start with how do we interrupt those sort of rituals, or if you're engaging in a lot of rumination, how do we interrupt that? And I mean, there's also like a whole side of exposures that are not necessarily in vivo or like hands-on kind of exposures. Imaginal exposures are also a way to go where, you can work with your clinician and kind of figure out either like a script or something of that sort to really take a deep dive into approaching like what that situation might be like if there were carbon monoxide poisoning in your home and you were exposed to that chemical, like playing that kind of out in an imaginal sort of exposure, that is another option. That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was like also thinking like, I don't even know where carbon monoxide comes from.
I know.
I know
I'm
that
like,
the other night I was cooking dinner and I have like a gas stove and I turned it on, but I didn't realize until like a while afterwards that it hadn't lit the flame. So it was just putting off gas. And me and my fiance were just like inhaling it. And I was like, what? And is that carbon monoxide?
I think so. Or I mean, regardless, that sounds like a pretty big trigger. So.
Yeah, that was a really big trigger. So I mean, I definitely can relate to that. And I think, if, for example, the OCD comes up in like turning on and off your stove, like practicing turning on and off your stove without checking. If the OCD comes up in, I don't know, like your air vents, like putting your face up to your air vents and like breathing it in and sort of like also allowing that experience, that possibility that there could be carbon monoxide coming out as well. So yeah, I definitely think there's I don't want to use the word fun, but I definitely feel like there's some creative ways that you can engage with that. And then scripting is just like, so standard. You can do scripting for almost anything. And it's a great ERP because it can be your worst fears, which is a way to sort of get straight to that core obsession. That can be helpful sometimes.
Would always love to hear about the creative ERPs that you all come up with.
Oh,
we love
yes,
embracing
that is the quirks.
That is the quirks that we love. We love to hear those. All right. Let's go to another one. Why is it that although nothing you have ever worried about has happened, OCD tells you that this time you need to worry? That is classic OCD. That is the classic move right there. It's like, all right, I have all of this proof in my back pocket that, this hasn't happened before. Like, chances are slim, but no, this time in particular, like, this is the time it's going to get me. Like, yeah, why does it do that? OCD. I don't have an answer for that. But regardless, it is an extremely frustrating situation to deal with, when you're battling this I'm just like rereading this again to like truly process this. I'm like, ugh. I don't know if I have an answer, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why that is. But I mean, to me, I'm just like, well, of course,
Yeah.
of course OCD, because it has nothing else to, like, what's it called? Like, it has no other collateral to offer, nothing else to wager with. That's the only thing that it has, is the threat of whatever it is you're fearful of happening coming true, or potentially not coming true, depending on what your obsession is. OCD can't base itself in logic. That doesn't work. It can't base itself in your values. That doesn't work. The only thing it can get at is your fear. So without, even though like you have this recurring amount of proof that your OCD fear hasn't come true all of these times, like OCD is going to latch onto that as the last ditch effort always, because that's all that it has. And weird as it is to like potentially believe it, like this was true even before you were doing ERP, but like that was always true. This is all that OCD ever had from the beginning. But OCD really doesn't want you to know that, because it really like disempowers it, I think, like truly. And but yeah, I don't know why that is. I just
Yeah.
think it's a sneaky tool though.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess like needing to know why is maybe not the most fruitful kind of effort. Instead, like perhaps like I think what Ali was saying is also very important of like, yeah, of course it makes sense that this is trying to do this and trying to get in the sneaky way. Like when we're able to pay attention to those patterns, it gives it less power.
Yeah, and I'm not like a neuropsychologist, so I feel like I don't know enough about like why certain things happen with OCD. And I have that curiosity myself, but I also try myself like not to get too caught in that, because I think even that can be a distraction sometimes from my recovery, from accepting things as they are.
Mhm.
Yeah. I can do another. I can do the next one because I have a particular. I'm intrigued by this one. Thomas Murphy said, "I'm having sexual intrusive thoughts about my mother for the last 6 months." Also classic. Although ERP has worked and has been effective, I still continue to question whether this is OCD or some repressed feelings.
Mm.
Maya, I'm sending it to you. My
Sounds like
sexual intrusive thoughts expert. My sexpert,
yes.
if you will.
Oh gosh, I'm the sexpert now. Yikes. Yeah, don't actually take me for that because I know nothing because of OCD. um, well, I would say that, I mean, the part I still continue to question whether this is OCD or some repressed feelings. That sounds like we're getting into some obsessing about obsessing territory where, that's a nice sly way for OCD to come in a full swing again. If we're diving into this question, we're diving back into the original obsession of, um, you know, we're diving right back into these sexual intrusive thoughts. And yeah, like this is an extremely distressing experience to have and to be going through. And especially for as long as it's been like 6 months dealing with this same repetitive thought, that is extremely distressing. And again, kind of related to the last question, like, of course, OCD is still trying to come back in and target this and find a new way to keep you obsessing around it. Um, yeah, I mean, I would love to hear Allie's thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we tend to, but me too, like laugh off intrusive sexual thoughts just because they are so like taboo. Even within the OCD community, people really struggle with the shame and stigma around kind of talking openly about their sexual intrusive thoughts, specifically like pedophilia, OCD, or incest, or rape and sexual violence. And that's understandable, right? Like we know, even in media and things like that, like the entire world unfortunately doesn't understand OCD yet. This community does, which is great. It's a very kind of safe space to be in, I think. We really go to bat for each other, that's for sure. But yeah, I think I tend to laugh them off as a coping skill, but I don't want that to come across at all as like invalidating. Because as Maya said, like these are incredibly distressing. And you wouldn't be here having this conversation with us if that wasn't the case. So it makes sense that you're really struggling with that. I have the most annoying answer ever, which is you saying like, I still continue to question whether this is OCD or some repressed feelings. And my annoying answer is, yeah, like you might never know whether or not it's OCD or repressed feelings. And the unfortunate truth is that there's just no way to know for sure. So what kind of can you do in this moment with the skills that you have? What do you know for sure? What you do know is what you did in the past didn't work, or what you do know is that the treatment for OCD is this. So maybe it's kind of time to try something new with that, which in this case would probably be every time you're noticing that you're questioning, like if you're at the point in your brain where you're having that conversation with yourself, you're questioning whether this is OCD or some repressed feelings, or you're engaging in an argument with those intrusive thoughts, being able to be like, I'd like to spend my time doing anything else, literally anything else, than argue with myself about whether I'm having sexual intrusive thoughts about my mom, right? I also think this is really like important conversation starter too around OCD and how it impacts intimacy, both like sexual intimacy, but also just intimacy with others, with family, with friends. I think that's a really significant part of OCD experience and part of what can be so stigmatizing. I won't get on my soapbox about it right now, but I just wanted to put that out there. I think that this is a larger conversation, Thomas, than even just this question. And I thank you for bringing that up, because I think this is, really important stuff for us to be chatting about. But I hope that helps.
Yeah. This is something I'll bring up. Balance between letting go and trying.
Love that username. Like Frozen. I love it.
Yes. Balance between letting go and trying. Well, let's see. I don't know how I want to tackle this, actually. I thought I did.
I'm personally am like, this is very vague. So I'm not totally sure. Is it kind of asking for some advice on how to balance between letting go and
That's
trying?
my assumption. It's like, yeah, how do you strike the balance between letting go and trying? And I'm guessing this is a recovery question, and like, I don't know. Maybe we need some more information on this.
Love is an open door if you're open to considering giving us some more information.
Okay, more of a statement, not a question. All right. Let's see. We'll go to this. What's your opinion on responding to thoughts with rationalizing or logic?
How has that worked for people?
Yeah, how has that worked
for people? I want to hear about it, because it didn't work for me. I've never heard of it working for anyone. I want to know, truly. If it's worked for people, like, I'm not even being facetious. I want to know about it. And like how you made it work. I don't know, Maya, what's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, in terms of people that have dealt with OCD firsthand, like, we hear it a lot that logic does not work with OCD, and that it's just not a great combating force. And that instead of rationalizing and using logic, that kind of accepting the uncertainty, sitting with the maybe, and in that space, and not putting yourself down the rabbit hole of thinking through all the logistics of everything, of how this could be right or how this could be, whatever the fear is. That's the place where we get stuck, is the thought spiral. And so I find that responding to like intrusive thoughts with logic and whatnot is most of the time not helpful, because it just gets me more stuck in thinking about that obsession, and I'm spending more time on that obsession, when probably the best thing for me to do is to just detach from that and move forward in a way that benefits my values instead.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I don't do it, right? But I really try to notice when I'm engaging it and recognize it for what it is. Like, it definitely has that reassuring function. Anytime I'm at logic in this kind of conversation with OCD, I'm like already engaging in a ritual, because I'm already trying to decrease my anxiety by telling myself that logically doesn't make sense, right? or I'm shaming myself, neither of which are going to help me in my recovery later on. And I think also, like, the thing with people with OCD is, like, you never didn't know that it was illogical. You always knew that. We all with OCD know and have the sense that what we're doing doesn't match up with our, like, rational belief system, with our logical kind of problem solving skills and things like that. So I think also recognizing that conversation can be an empty use of energy because you already know that, and that didn't prevent you from getting OCD, unfortunately. It's one of the unique things about this illness, really.
Mm-hmm. Allie, I'm curious about your input on this one. How do you be okay with the uncomfortable feeling of ERP when you struggle with contamination? I struggle sitting with the discomfort. Any tips on how to stop intrusive thoughts?
So I'm wondering if this is like disgust contamination, because, like, I think of, like, discomfort and that disgust, and that's like less of anxiety, although certainly anxiety provoking, but more just like really uncomfortable. And I know for me, when I'm experiencing disgust contamination, I will have a lot of physical, like, tummy turning, and sometimes feel like I'm, like, almost gagging, or just feeling really, really disgusted. That can be a very overwhelming feeling. So no wonder that's uncomfortable, of course. Any tips on how to stop intrusive thoughts? So no, right? Like, there's nothing we can do. There's no cure for intrusive thoughts. People talk about the use of medication as part of therapy, obviously when provided and prescribed by a medical professional, psychiatrist, as part of your treatment team. They talk about that almost turning down the volume of the intrusive thoughts. So the intrusive thoughts don't go away, but it kind of feels like maybe they're not screaming at you all the time. I've heard people share that experience before, but never, ever have I heard anyone just be like, yeah, my intrusive thoughts just stopped. And I wish I had a better answer for you, Andrea, truly, because I too wish that my intrusive thoughts could stop. But unfortunately, I think a big part of where we're all at in this recovery process is the quite radical acceptance required to kind of say, like, this is going to happen, right? This is a part of my brain. I've had these intrusive thoughts for this amount of time. I will have these intrusive thoughts somewhat indefinitely. Things may not always be this hard. I may not always associate a lot of anxiety and reaction, things like that, to them, but those thoughts will probably always be there. This is also, like, one of my favorite topics too, which is that, like, literally everyone has intrusive thoughts. Like, people who don't have OCD have intrusive thoughts. I've heard people in kind of clinical settings, like, talking about how, like, they think about, like, running children over, like, they think about, having sex with a family member. But for them, they experience that thought as pretty passing, really don't attach any meaning to it, except maybe occasionally be like, that's weird. Anyway. And then things go on, right? So the difference for those of us who have OCD is very much getting stuck on the meaning of those thoughts, the interpretation, and all of the layers that kind of come from that. So that's my spiel. But I'm curious to hear what Maia has to say.
Yeah, definitely. I just totally ditto everything on the how to stop intrusive thoughts. Like, yeah, unfortunately, it's probably not going to happen. And if it does, miracle. Wow.
And teach us.
Yes, tell us.
No.
But yeah, and I think, yeah, I'm just totally in agreement that, we can best deal with intrusive thoughts and, I don't know how to say that exactly, but I think the best approach to not experiencing so much distress around intrusive thoughts is to allow them to be there, and try not to attach that meaning to them. Obviously, for any of us who struggle with OCD, that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And, it's very automatic for us to attach that meaning. And in conjunction, like, experience anxiety and whatnot with that. But yes, just allowing that feeling to be there. And I hate to say that again because it's like the most vague thing ever that doesn't necessarily feel helpful when someone's like, all right, just allow that, just sit with that, sit with that.
It's like the OCD cliche now.
It is. It really is. And it kind of sucks. But, also as someone who's been doing ERP for a while now, it works weirdly. It works.
Yeah, it's like the weirdest counterintuitive treatment experience ever.
It is. Yeah. All right, let's hit up another question. Allie, do you have one that you particularly
Sure. We can do, I'm going to guess Gandic, but please correct me if that pronunciation is off. Do you think music therapy is good for OCD? I don't know what music therapy is. Do you?
Oh.
Expressive arts therapist?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
Okay. Well, tell me. I would like to learn.
So I've never actually heard it being used with OCD specifically, but I guess I'm curious. I think it could be very useful for particular cases if someone has obsessions that kind of breach into music somehow, or audio kind of sensations, I guess, like that sort of thing. That could be actually a pretty cool avenue to explore. As someone who is kind of doing undergraduate research and stuff in expressive arts therapy and OCD, like there's not a lot of research out there on this. But my personal opinion is if music somehow fits in with what you struggle with, that could be a really powerful avenue, actually. I know I've actually, I won't go down that way, but
is it like a specific format of therapy, or is it kind of like how it sounds?
I mean, it's using music as, I mean, it can be very different depending on how you're using it and what you're using it for. So how I would see it being most beneficial is kind of as an ERP, or like at least merging the two kind of formats. So let's say, like, Allie, if you don't mind me saying, like, you have some like fears that attach to certain like lyrics and songs and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And so I imagine for you, ERP at one point or another would be listening to those songs and just like allowing that song to play and staying present with that and following the music, and not getting stuck on whatever trigger was present there and down the rumination spiral. So I think in some sort of way that that could be pretty beneficial depending on the individual. Of course, anything that someone with OCD does to try and treat their OCD, like that's not necessarily going to help another person who struggles. These things are kind of, they may work for you, but not for others. But yeah, I could see that actually being a really unique and cool tool.
Yeah, like you said, Maya, I did like I also did some like singing ERPs because I like naturally sing all the time, which is so annoying to everyone in my life. Mm-hmm. But I just do that. And what I noticed during like the intense symptoms that I was having is I started either avoiding listening to those songs, or a different ritual, which was to sort of like neutralize them by like, once I noticed I was singing or humming a really triggering song, let's say the lyrics were like regarding drugs or a metaphor about drugs or things like that, then I would like find like a safe song and then hum or sing that to sort of like wash away the badness. So I definitely, like, a big part of my ERP for a time was to actually like intentionally sing those songs a cappella or just like listen to them. And I made a playlist specifically for this with these really triggering songs on it. And then I had to listen to them like all the time. So that was a big part of it. And then I know there's like mindfulness with music too, where you can sort of like do the activities of like listening to like just one instrument through the whole song, or really trying to practice being present. So yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I have to share a story related to this because I just remembered this and it makes me laugh even. So one of my ERPs when I was doing some outpatient work, I actually rewrote lyrics to children's songs that were sexual. So this was when I was like saying sexual words aloud. I was writing them down in notebooks for ERPs. And so my therapist was like, all right, let's sing songs with all of these triggering words. And
Love
so,
it.
for that, I had to stay very present in order to, get the lyrics that I wrote down right, get the pitch right, and all this stuff. So that was another fun. It was actually, yeah, weirdly enough, that was actually a really fun ERP to look back
Yeah,
on. And that's kind of a cool variation on the music therapy sort of theme.
totally.
But yeah, it was actually with his children's instruments as well. So that was definitely attacking some
Oh,
specific types of sexual intrusive thoughts.
definitely.
Yes. All right. Let's go on to another question. Let's see. I'm going to go to this. I have never actually heard the term order OCD personally. I don't know if you have, Allie.
Nope.
So I'm going to make the assumption that this has something to do with perfectionism. But again, I do not want to make that assumption. So I guess, Hap L, if you have any more to say about like your experience of like what order OCD means to you, maybe we could answer better.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I
That,
have assumptions also.
yeah, and I don't
Again,
want
since
to.
it's like related to symmetry or NJREs, and like we have no idea. We
Yeah.
literally have no idea. So yes, would love to hear from you.
All right, that would have worked if you knew the reference, Allie, but
Yeah.
I don't.
Next time, next time. At first, I thought it said Law and Order, which is a separate.
You're like, yes, I know.
That's also very
Law,
triggering. So
Law
I
and
was like,
Order.
ready to talk about how Law and Order is triggering for people with OCD.
That's totally fair. All right. Spencer Johnson. Having had germophobia pre-COVID, issues with touching things, wearing surgical gloves, how do I process reintegrating outside of the home as COVID progresses? What's safe and what isn't?
The question
Yeah.
of the 2-year pandemic.
Indeed. COVID has really thrown this community in a loop, specifically those who struggle with contamination concerns and health anxiety. It's been a long 2 years of navigating these sorts of concerns. And yeah. And now, this is very relevant, reintegrating into the outside world again. How do we make that transition to more normalcy? And then when maybe that things need to like backslide and more restrictions get imposed again, like how do we deal with all of these transitions and changes in, how do we really understand what is safe and what isn't? And I think a start to this answer is like, at any given time, like we may or may not know what's safe and what isn't, and kind of rolling with the punches. And yeah, I don't really have. I mean, I definitely cannot answer what's safe and what isn't. That is not territory
Well out
that
of
I
the
am.
realm of our expertise.
That is, yes, that is well out of my realm of expertise. But I mean, I can definitely speak to this whole struggle of reintegrating and trying to, resituate yourself when the structure of your life is changing because of this pandemic. Like that has definitely thrown a lot of punches. Ellie, what are your thoughts on that?
I have so many. Well, because we've talked about this a lot with hard Quirk. Like we have talked about it in events and things like that because it's so unbelievably relevant, right? Like we are watching our clinicians, our friends, our family engage in things that we had to unlearn. We're watching our friends and family engage in things that we were taught were ritualistic, were excessive in nature. And now people are doing those things. I mean, the examples are endless. Like like wiping off your groceries and excessive or like timely hand washes and, hand sanitizer with you at all times and social distancing and contaminant tracking, like literally checking who's touched who and where. And so, yeah, it gets so truly confusing. And I want to, validate what I'm assuming might be your experience, but also just speak to like my own experience, which is that like I found that to be kind of disorienting because I felt like, okay, there's these, set of rules that other people live by, and their rules are very relaxed compared to mine, right? And then I learned them, and then all of a sudden that was very different and very new. So that was really challenging and still is to this day. I mean, as Maia kind of got at, I think it's like it's getting less and less challenging as things are opening back up. But as Maia also mentioned, there might be like a little bit of that kind of sawtooth movement on the graph where we're opening back up and then shutting back down and then opening back up and shutting back down. And the reality is, and like this is actually very unsettling, but the reality is like what we've learned throughout this pandemic is like we largely like don't know what's safe. The CDC has had challenges coming out with new policies and how to follow those in a way that's the safest for you, including that aligns with your OCD recovery. So maybe for some people, that means following the rules not to a T, following the rules haphazardly. There's just a lot that kind of goes into it. And that's required a lot of, I think, mental and emotional energy on part of this community to be a part of. And then separately from that, I also feel that we all sort of served as this like weirdly positive example to people of how to tolerate the distress that comes with this uncertainty. Because I heard time and time again from my peers, from myself, friends and family that like everyone else seemed to be in catastrophe, sort of in like, what do you call it? Catastrophizing mode. And we were sort of able to almost, I think of like the meme with the dog and the flames around him. And he's like, it's fine. And like, that's us. We're just like, yeah, welcome to our world. That we've been doing this for a while, right? So yeah, I just want to almost validate like how challenging that is. And what I have chosen to do, I won't even say that this is advice, because I don't think I'm qualified to give advice, but what I have chosen to do for my recovery is to follow the CDC guidelines and regulations to the best of my ability as it relates specifically to my values and as it relates to like being haphazard. So I don't check CDC guidelines. I feel like I'll hear them word of mouth for the most part. I still don't like count when doing hand washes or things like that. I try to have safe practices that are still safe for me as well in my recovery. And that's a big part of that for me. So it's kind of, that's been a really big experience.
It has. Absolutely. All right, let's try to squeeze in one or two more. Let's see. We'll go to this one. I'm 22 and I have a lot of fears about becoming a parent in the coming years and the fear that things now won't actually get much better. What's your advice on this and how it could relate to OCD? I'm curious. I have a lot of fears about it. I'm curious about what these fears are, but kind of not knowing specifics. It sounds like these kind of fears are very future focused. And I think to the best of your ability, being able to trail back and stay in the present moment and deal with what is currently happening, that's going, like, keeping yourself grounded essentially, is going to at least keep, I don't even know how to say that.
It's hard
It's
hard to speak to when we like don't know the content of the fears, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, I know as a person who's getting ready to get married this year, like this has been on my mind a lot. And I also just have really like, I think significant standards for like how to parent and like what kind of parent I want to be as it relates to my values. Um, I don't have the answers for you, but I do know that like when it comes to the people that I've met and adored as part of this community, what I've learned is that these people are intellectual, they are super smart, like able to sort of understand concepts really quickly, resilient, brilliant, they have integrity, they have compassion, they have all these really wonderful qualities. And my hope is that in spite of the fact that I have OCD and in spite of the fact that I might struggle as a parent, that my child will benefit from all of the really wonderful parts of me and those qualities that can exist in spite of having OCD. I mean, people have kids all the time with all different kinds of issues, right? So all that you can really do as a parent is practice self-care, take care of yourself, stay in recovery, and be the best parent that you can be.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to think if I had anything to add there. No, I think you summed it up for me.
Okay, good. You can answer the next one.
I like totally lost what I was going. I was going down somewhere with a thought, but it did not come to fruition.
So it happens.
Indeed. All right, this next one I can definitely relate to.
Oh,
How to deal with the need to understand what happens after death. Literally, I was thinking about this earlier today.
have we
Um,
all been thinking? I've been thinking about this. I was talking to a coworker who doesn't even have OCD, but this person is a professional in working with people who have OCD. He's been struggling with this. It's a thing.
yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's like it is a human experience to wonder about this and then
Absolutely.
add OCD into the mix, and it's like that's something heavy that I can latch onto, you know? Um, so how to deal with the need to understand what happens after death? I think a lot of this is, you know, cultivating some acceptance and radical acceptance about, you know, not going to know. Never know going to know for sure. Um, and you know, this thought is still going to come up, and you know, you could be spending hours upon hours just ruminating about this. I know I did when I was younger. This was definitely one of those existential obsessions that I dealt with constantly. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I now cannot personally expend my energy like obsessing about it anymore because I do understand logically that I'm never going to know. And it's more so like for me dealing with the emotional side of like, all right, how do I accept this? And I do not have an answer for that. Unfortunately, I wish I did. Um, yeah, Allie, do you have any experience with this one?
I mean,
Well,
do
yes,
I?
you did, but
Do I have answers? No. Well,
yes.
I mean, this is another one of those things that's like a universal human experience, right? Like you do not have to have OCD to have this fear, just like you were saying, Maya. And then add OCD into that. This is like the most uncertain thing that there ever was. So of
Yeah.
course, OCD is like, wow, this is like my bread and butter right here. Like this is the core of everything. I mean, I know when I've experienced the existential kind of, I don't even like just anxiety and thoughts and things like that. I tend to experience like some like more dissociative kind of symptoms and tendencies, and that can sort of be alarming. I can also sometimes get very stuck in like scrupulosity if I start thinking about like what happens afterwards and things like that. So there's just a lot of different like nuances to it. It can be a really challenging experience for sure. But I think the thing like OCD is going to use that too as a tool to be like, no, this is the ultimate one. This one is the thing that's like above all others. It's like, okay, OCD, you say that about everything, right? Every time is different, just as the person mentioned earlier, or every single obsession is the one that I really have to worry about this time. And where has it gotten me? Like Maya said, it's not something I want to spend my energy on anymore. It's never benefited me in the past. Haven't learned yet what happens after death. So here I am, just not knowing that. And I don't want to downplay how uncomfortable that experience is, because it's extremely uncomfortable. And like, the faster that you are, or I should say the sooner that you are willing to start practicing that acceptance, then the sooner you're able to start focusing on other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to wrap us up with this question, because I know that we definitely have some thoughts on this.
Perfect wrap up.
It is a perfect wrap up, right? All right. So tips for relapse prevention after a course of treatment. Well, hard Quirk started kind of right at this point where Allie and I were leaving treatment and like, okay, now what? So, I mean, I think one huge thing that has been helpful for my recovery, and I imagine Allie as well, but I'll let you speak to that, is just staying really connected with the OCD community in whatever form benefits you, makes sense to you. Social media has been a great place for resources to be shared, for information to go around, to destigmatize things, and really there's a large community on social media that has been very outspoken and advocating for the OCD community. And I've found that to be really important for my relapse prevention, because it keeps me in check with, people are constantly talking about different subtypes, rituals, and so these things are very present for me in a way that is recovery oriented. And I find that to be very helpful. Allie, what about you? I definitely have more to say, but I want to get you in on here.
I know. Yeah. No, I mean, of course, this is the entire reason that we founded Hard Quirk. It's literally because, as Maia said, we were at that place in our treatment where we discharged from residential treatment, and we're kind of like, okay, we're back in the world now. And we know that rates of relapse for OCD are significant. We know how challenging it is to battle every single day with these things, these thoughts and the urges and things like that. So with that in mind, what's going to help? We loved, something that we really loved about treatment was laughing with each other. As Maia mentioned, that community aspect, being able to talk about our shared experiences, we found that to be pretty therapeutic. We really wanted to mimic that in Hard Quirk, find that community. Of course, you all are welcome to be a part of that community as well. You can find us at hardquirk.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, things like that. We're eventually going to get on TikTok, but we're just not young and hip enough yet. We're trying our best here. And, we have totally fallen in love with and gotten motivated by all of the people that we've heard from since starting Hard Quirk, people that we've talked to at events or at conventions or gotten direct messages from or having support groups. That's been a really, really meaningful and special experience. And I personally feel like that's contributed to my own recovery, just having that sense of purpose, that sense of advocacy. We're always trying to eradicate stigma around OCD, things like that. Honestly, the most important thing is stay with a treatment team, because they keep you on track. They keep you accountable. They help you make transitions should you decide you want to make transitions at any point. And OCD shapeshifts. It can be sneaky. So definitely stay with a treatment team of some sort. Provide that as a form of self-care, as stability for you.
Mm-hmm. And I would also add just definitely incorporating some self-directed ERP into the mix as well. Yeah, definitely hard. It's very hard to prioritize that, to make space for that in your schedule, because it is such an uncomfortable experience most of the time, I would say. But definitely that has been also very helpful in kind of maintaining your gains.
I also want to say, I just really struggle with us not having gotten to all the questions, because you're so happy that all of you are here. So just want you to know we are noticing your comments. We're just really trying to respect Jenna's time, our time, your time. by wrapping things up. We'll just like quickly say that, you know, for some of you, like I know Martha, you mentioned you're struggling. Sorry to hear that. That sounds like a really hard thing. Have some questions coming up around OCD and psychosis, common subtype, right? Like I've definitely struggled with that all the time. And TMS is absolutely on the rise right now, Elizabeth. So you're right. There's a lot of really cool things going on and treatments for that. Unfortunately, we really don't have time to get into it, but I just wanted people to feel heard while they were here.
Absolutely. And we are always open to discussions on social media,
Totally.
on our forum, on hardquirk.com, as well if you guys want to get some feedback from us as well as other community members. So that's a nice place if there are conversations that we unfortunately did not have the time to get to tonight. Anything else, Allie, before we wrap up?
I don't think so. We'll be here next week.
Yes, we will be here next Monday. So
yeah, we're excited.
bring all your questions.
Yeah, we're really like wearing out our welcome here. So definitely show up. We will. We're excited to hear from all of you again.
All right. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.